Hi, everybody. I'm Lee, and this is Valley Voices. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a special guest. We're going to be talking with someone I got to meet about 2 years ago, Veronica Lukasinski, and you're listed as a partner liaison currently on our Slack profile. What exactly is that?
We have amazing partner liaisons. I'm in a bit of a hybrid position. So my partner liaisoning is more so I'm the civil commitment coordinator for Valley. And so I work very directly with the courts and with Optum and trying to improve the civil commitment process. So that's my partnership that I really am the liaison for. Our partner liaisons that are in the comms and CareNav kind of intersection are pretty much the responders to hospitalizations and ensure that we get proper discharge linkage. And so
Mhm.
they are rock stars. I am not
I
that
disagree.
rock
I
star.
disagree. When we met, it was actually a transition of the care navigation program was changing from a
Mhm.
really small focused operation that started at Masters and then spread out and became a really powerful project, I think, in hindsight, looking back on it. Had you just come back to Valley at that moment?
Yeah, so I started as a case manager with Core 2 a few years ago, and that went in mixed ways.
Sure.
But I came back last January, two
It was just,
Januaries ago.
yeah, almost two
I,
years.
it's just, yeah, 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Words are hard sometimes. But I came back, one, because I saw that there was the advanced case manager position, and I was specifically attracted to the fact that Valley is seeing that our case managers are overworked and need extra support. And so seeing an advanced case manager position was really enticing to me. And considering my previous experience, I definitely felt like I wanted to support others that were in my position previously. So I came in as an advanced case manager, and they decided to place me with Care Navigation. And myself and Melanie Loveland were kind of the original Care Navigation ACMs. We are essentially the most senior Care Nav team people. The focus has changed a lot over time, but I think the main theme that you will see with Care Navigation is that we're trying to address barriers and holes through treatment. And so that inherently puts us in a transitionary type of program space. So we're identifying holes and we're taking those on and trying to bridge gaps that we might be finding. So that's why we didn't start doing civil commitment till last year. And I kind of took that on and been able to improve a lot of the internal processes. And now that I have been able to improve those things and people are actually responding, we haven't been receiving any complaints from the courts. And now I have met with various partners to try to improve the systemic issues that
Right.
are coming with civil commitment. And that is only through the process of finding a hole and then doing tangible stuff internally. Then we can go outwardly to really bridge systemic change.
And one of the things I noticed with care navigation when we're working at the Chi report and pulling that up
Mhm.
and finding literally in many cases finding a case manager's clients that had been admitted to the hospital for one reason or another, whether it was self-admission, whether it was a civil commitment, and being able to say, oh, hey, your client is in the hospital, your client is in a rehab center working through a kidney transplant or something like that. It was an interesting thing to do because I think a lot of times if you're a case manager and you have 70 or 120 clients, you may lose somebody. They may
Yeah.
that hospitalization, you may not see them for 2 or 3 weeks and have no idea where they're at. So did you find that it was a lot like detective work?
Yeah, very much. So we receive reports and we're able to them from there try to kind of investigate what happened. The truth is, sometimes it's hard for case managers to keep up with everything, but also clients aren't always honest when they go to the hospitals that they are Valley clients, that they need support or they have a case manager, that they have any type of treatment whatsoever. And it's very helpful for us to kind of start figuring out what is going on. And if a client is being dishonest about their behavioral health services, there's a reason for that. It's not to attribute some type of morality or ethic to the client, but if they are saying that they're not receiving services, there's something that's happening there that we need to address, right? Like maybe they don't like our services or something's not working and we need to figure that out. So there's a lot of different ways to start going about it, but ultimately whatever the client is saying at the hospital, we're trying to figure out what is going on overall. So if a client is going for purely medical reasons, that still is going to impact their mental health and behavioral exacerbation. That's definitely going to impact all of that. So if we're seeing a client repeatedly go to the hospital for minor things, that itself is speaking to an issue that they're experiencing. We can look and we can see transcriptions that say specifically like this client was suicidal. That's very clear as to like our needs, but sometimes it's less clear. This client has gone to the hospital for really minor things, and later on we'll look at it and it's they were looking for shelter, for housing, and it's indicative of bigger needs. So we're kind of always trying to do like deductive reasoning to figure out what the issues are. And then we try to recommend treatment and follow up to really make sure that we are seeing the client holistically.
That's awesome. So I wanted to talk about civil commitment for a second because
Mhm.
my mind was blown the first time I was involved in helping a client who had had a civil commitment situation. That is a pretty severe situation for somebody to go through, isn't it?
Yeah, so essentially, civil commitment doesn't really happen unless the client has been hospitalized because they were a danger to themselves or others. And then the hospitals have decided that this person needs to be committed and compelled to treatment in order to maintain their own safety and as well as others. And so it is a pretty intense process. It doesn't always feel that way. And sometimes it doesn't have the teeth that we need it to have. But it is like an intense thing, and that's why I do tend to be quite strict and pushy in the civil commitment coordination in Valley, because in the end, if the courts don't hold up, that's not our fault.
Right.
But if we're not responsive and we're not outreaching and trying to make sure that the clients are in treatment, then that's on us, because in the end, they are compelled to treatment, but we are responsible for their treatment as well. So it's kind of a commitment altogether.
Yeah, we can have a court say they have to go to treatment, but afterwards, that step down process is where the success is going to come into play, right? So,
Yeah.
what compelled you? We're talking about compulsion here. What compelled you to come into this line of work? It's something people do. If you're doing public facing behavioral health care, you're not doing it for the riches and the fame. You're doing it for something else. What pulled you into this?
Yes, I have been working in social service work for a bit. I wanted to transition to more of the public facing piece. As I would see, a lot of us clinicians get really drained from the demands, and there's a lot of systemic issues that aren't being addressed. And so, in the end, I think in compassion for our clients, but also for our staff, I do want to start working in these more policy administrative spaces to try to improve the overall experiences. Because I think that our empathy and compassion for our clients is absolutely beautiful. And I want to make sure that those reservoirs are as filled as possible so that we can still be doing the best work possible, and that's why I took something like civil commitment on, because it's a draining process,
It
and
is.
it's also scary for the clients, and it can be scary to the staff. And so to be able to try to make it as easy of a process as possible, I think, and makes it a lot easier for our staff, and then they're able to actually do their other parts of the job because they don't have to be worried if they're doing things correctly.
So you're currently studying in another state, which is one of the things I love about Valley, is that if somebody has a passion for something and if somebody will find a way to keep you on the payroll, right? So what
Yeah.
is the focus of study right now? I know you're working in trying to find, like you were saying, those systemic causes that kind of haunt this profession.
Yeah, so I'm doing a dual master's degree. Well, yeah, two concurrent degrees, if that makes sense. I'm doing
Oh,
one.
no big deal. Just 2 master's degrees.
Yeah, one is in a master's of public policy, and the other is a master of science and justice studies. So I'm kind of at the intersection of social issues and policy. I want to be able, both of them are great, but I think like being able to study both concurrently I would be able to enmesh those topics that I deeply care about and be
So
more productive, I guess.
So in the one, you're able to see maybe an area that something isn't meshing right with the other area and maybe try to find that connection.
Yeah, so like justice studies is more of a research based master's program, which are kind of dwindling in popularity, but it is like a research focus. And so I do want to develop that critical thinking skill and the data analysis piece, but I also want to go and do very technical work with policy, which is that's my other program, right? I think they will both uplift each other, as one is very informative in like these theoretical frameworks and intellectual curiosity pieces. The other one's going to be a little more strict in terms of data analysis, program evaluation, policy analysis, all that fun stuff. So that's the theoretical
Right.
thing that I'm trying to pursue, I guess.
So let's flash forward 5 years now. You've taken this dual masters concept here with these two
Yeah.
different fields of work, and you've put them together. What are you going to do with that? What is Veronica Lukasinski doing in 5 years with this very focused, I would have to say you have a passion for it, definitely. What are you going to do when you put this into action? I'm very curious about this. I'm actually very excited about this.
The goal eventually would be to pursue a PhD. That would be really exciting, I think, to be able to do research on, like, even just continue to do research. Things that I'm particularly interested in is right now that there's an increasing rate of female incarceration. And like that is one of the biggest demographics in terms of like increased rates. Obviously, that creates very interesting, nuanced issues as our systems are not necessarily built for women. If we look at like these systemic issues of mass incarceration, we saw that primarily with the male population, and a lot of these low income and BIPOC and just overall marginalized communities have become very matriarchal in structure. And now, since those incarceration rates are increasing, right, we are also taking the mothers and we're taking out these structures that were built for survival. And so it's those things are going to be collapsing. And that is something that's very interesting to me in terms of like, how do we stop that? Because I want people to have families, to grow up in good communities, and to see that this is an increasing attack on these communities. I'm very concerned.
And there's lessons for us to learn there with the
Mm-hmm.
systemic destruction of the family unit in communities of color in the 1960s and 70s, with the massive incarceration of males in those communities, especially during that period of time. You'd think we would have learned a lesson there, tried to do something to reverse that. So I'm glad you're there to say stop.
Thank you. There's also the issue that comes up with that because we have these matriarchal structures, essentially, that these are the mothers of these families. 80% of women that are incarcerated are mothers. Most of them are low income, and a lot of them are there pre-trial in jails, which is due to bail issues. So a lot of them can't pay bail because they make poverty wages. And so it's
Right.
like it's a kind of informalized family separation that is destructive, and it's a compounding trauma to the communities, and it's also contagious. This might just happen with one family in a neighborhood somewhere. The impacts of it spread throughout. One of the things that's really interesting, if you look at the
No, you're
Prison
good.
Policy Initiative, calculated out this statistic that every year of incarceration depletes somebody 2 years of their life expectancy.
Oh, wow.
And so, what that has done with mass incarceration has depleted the entire population of the US, like, by 5 years. All of our expectations have been lowered because of mass incarceration. Contagious. Anyway, so those are
No,
things that I very deeply care about.
that's staggering. I remember reading something a couple of weeks back where somebody was saying, if a person of means commits a crime, they usually just pay a fine and that's it. They don't do any jail time. The family isn't disrupted, and in some cases, depending on the level of means that person comes from, it doesn't even disrupt their livelihood in the slightest bit. But a
Yeah.
person who's working two minimum wage jobs trying to keep a roof over their family's head because that person can't pay that fine, you just devastated that entire family's livelihood and ability to make ends meet or even have a roof over their head. I'm so glad that people like you are out there trying to change this, or at least illuminate people to this, because these
Yeah.
things are in place and they devastate families. Okay, well, we can get really deep with this.
Yes.
Veronica, I'm just fascinated with where you're going with this, and I actually want to talk to you again in a year. So I'm going to put a note to come
Oh
and talk to
boy.
you in November of 2022. But thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and talking about this really just fascinating and vital and essential focus that you have right now. And I'm really excited to see where you go with this. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
I think someone out there is going to hear this and go, oh, and that's why we do this. So awesome.
Perfect.